Okay, front derailleur. So, front derailleur here. Again, just like with the rear derailleur, everything we already have set up, the handlebars, the cables and housing running through those. The front derailleur is installed on the bike, the rear derailleur is installed on the bike, the crankset, the chain, the bottom bracket, all that kind of stuff. What this is simply going to go through is routing your housing and cable from the handlebars down along the frame to the front derailleur, rather. Installing that and then making sure that all the gears are working properly. So the setup for that, again here, because we have a very complex web of housing coming out of the handlebars and to its various locations here. We just want to make sure that everything is set up here. We have enough extra housing here that the handlebar didn't need to turn sharply all the way to the left or the right, that we're not going to end up short, not going to have any problems there, and it's not going to make anything too tight. And then we have the front derailleur housing curving a little bit over the center line of the bike, and this is the front derailleur housing curving over here. The front derailleur housing, again, it's typically going to run on the left side of your bike unless the cable stops that you see here are located low enough down that the cables can actually cross underneath the down tube of the bike. So we have that cable already installed through the first cable stop. We're going to run all the way down here. Again, we're going to go through the guide, the underside of the bottom bracket, and then that's going to pass up between the two chainstays, back behind the seat tube of the bike, and then clamp in place. So to do that, we're just going to lift up the bike quickly. I'm going to try and find the guide hold. Pass that in. So, done. And then we're going to pass up. So, between the chainstays. So, that's the front derailleur. So, front derailleur, here's our clamp point, right above that. Bring our camera in here for a second. So basically, as we see here, here's our cable that we brought up, here's the pinch bolt that we have, and here are our high and low screws. What we also have set up here, a unique situation from other bikes, is you can see that red piece of metal that we call a chain catcher. And I'll move the cable out of the way so I'll stop focusing on that. What this is designed for is, as you can kind of see, it is extremely close to the small ring which the chain is sitting on. The idea of that is basically that as you're shifting down from the big ring to the small ring, with that in place, it can't keep going if it gets jostled, misshift, you don't have something set up, right? And then it ends up falling down onto your bottom bracket and cutting into your frame. That setup can be a little bit tricky, but basically the simplest way, as we have here, we have the chain in the largest cog in the rear, we have the chain in the small chain ring, and then we basically bring that arm as close to the chain as possible with the spinning around without hearing it touch. And that's where we want to be. The other setup for the high and low screws, again, this bike has been set up, this derailleur has been set up on this bike previously, so all that we have done is we have dialed in the low screw, which is the one closest to the frame, and we've made that, again, with the chain in the largest cog in the rear, the small chain ring in the front. We've made it so the chain is just not touching the inner plate of the front derailleur. That's the lowest gear you're going to come into. That's the closest the chain is going to get towards the side of the bike. So that's where we want that screw. The other set screw is set up depending upon your upshifting, but again, that's already dialed in. So all we should have to do here is run the cable through, tighten it up, and then we should be good to go. Now, wrench, there we go. So our standard 5mm Allen. I'm going to loosen that up, and then per Shimano directions, we want to come over the top of this screw and behind the washer. So that's our setup. Like that. And then we tighten everything down. We're also going to check, make sure we are in our lowest possible gear. We're going to make sure that we have plenty of play in the barrel adjuster, because we may have to tension that a little bit. And we're just going to pull really tight on that cable. As we tighten up. Unfortunately, we're tightening the screw also in the direction the cable is passing. So once we get it tiny little bit snug, further tension on the bolt is only going to make the cable tighter. It can't possibly make it looser. And we have that nice angle pointing downward. That's going to be really important for cutting that off and pushing that out of the way, which is, so we see it coming down here. We don't obviously want it going into the gears or anything. What we're going to do is we're going to cut it off pretty much right before it hits the cage, and that's going to give us plenty of material to play with in order to grab hold of it. So it's out of the way. Right now, we're going to grab the cable cutters. So right about there. Cut off. We're going to cap it again with our wonderful little guys here. As you can see, no, it's not really focusing in well, but that's just going to fit right over the cable itself. Then we're going to use the back side of the cable cutters, squeeze and clamp that in place. And then it's a little bit more. It's completely out of the way. We're not going to tap it with our feet when we're pedaling. So, okay, so that's set up now. Now we're going to see how tight we managed to get that by doing upshift. And there we are. Okay. Obviously do a little bit of grinding. That's because we're in the duplicated gear as I stick my finger in the spokes. So this is a gear I would actually never be in, big and small. You can easily duplicate it with other gear ratios. So normally this is a 10-speed cassette. If I'm in the big ring, I'm only going to use the 6 smallest. If I'm in the small chain ring, I'm only going to use the 6 largest in the back here. So we're way overshifted, or as we also like to call, it's something we like to call a crossover. So we want to avoid that completely. Now that we're in that, just make sure that cable's really out of the way. As we pedal, we should hear no rubbing on the front derailleur cage, which we don't. And if we keep on going 9 gears, alright, we come to the far extent of our gear's in the back, and the chain is not hitting the outer plate of the front derailleur. That's good as well. Matter of fact, we could maybe even dial that back a little bit. So drop that. And I'm just going to turn that quarter turn back up. There we go. Don't see any rubbing. Obviously the outer screw, the high screw is very important. If it's dialed too far out, your chain will actually fall off the outside if you have it too far. But we don't want it so much that we are rubbing. Yeah, I think we got that. It's good. So you can see, okay, we're at our biggest gear ratio here. One of the important things we talked about before, that B set screw on the rear derailleur, that guy that's right up here, that's kind of important. And as we look at it from the profile, we see if we draw a line through the axle, through approximately the center of where the top pulley is, and the center of the bottom pulley, we almost have a straight line. The B screw is important in setting that. If we dialed that in more, it would pull the derailleur back more. It's the idea of trying to get that straight as line as possible. That's just overall going to help with the quality of the shifting. So it'll be almost silent if you have it dialed in perfectly. Too much in like this, it's going to be more difficult to shift because you see the chain's almost wrapping around the bottom side. So B screw, very critical, but it's a kind of ambiguous setup. It's something you just kind of have to play with and get a feel for it. Everything else is pretty good. The front derailleur, we're going to drop back down now. You see, you're going to hear a little bit rubbing on the front derailleur because, again, this is a gear I wouldn't normally be in, so we're going to get a tiny bit of rubbing. But if we move up a little bit, not a problem at all. And we'll drop down because, again, I just want to check the tension on this front derailleur. It feels a little bit loose, so I'm just going to dial that barrel adjuster out on the head tube. So we got a good amount of tension there. Not too much, but a fair amount. And we seem good.